All right, we're just loading up here. We should be live now, but we'll start the discussion in a moment when I update the website. All right, here we go. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, we are done. We are good to go. All right, I'll give a little spiel just for a second here, Brian, if you don't mind, and then we will be rocking and rolling.
Sounds great.
All right. So let me just close this. Okay, welcome everybody. This is NDs for Truth live discussion number 4. I'm Dr. Moshe Daniel Block, a naturopathic doctor who is very disheartened by the gag orders that seem to be coming down on the naturopathic profession and naturopathy losing its essence to conventional ideologies and basically not speaking up during these COVID times to help people. And lots of other political issues that we will get to. Today, I have a very special guest, Brian Bunn, who's a friend of mine and brilliant guy, encyclopedic knowledge, very extensive background with knowledge in a lot of different fields. So I'm gonna pick his brain. We're gonna talk about some fringe topics, but also some interesting and important topics for today's issues, in particular voter fraud. We're going to look at the vote. We're going to look at controlled opposition. And we're going to look at naturopathy, the status of naturopathy. And this is going to be the beginning. Brian and I could probably have a discussion for about 10 hours, and that would be him talking 99% of the time. I'll get in there too. We're going to have a little discussion on these different topics. Let me give you a little bit of his background, which is also now updated on the website. Brian Bunn was a founder of Healthy House Doctors. It's an environmental, he's an environmental epidemiologist, electromagnetic radiation safety advisor, registered environmental health specialist, permaculturist, and has trained and consulted for many doctors, dentists, and scientists in North America throughout the world. Brian, you had just mentioned that you are helping naturopathic doctors remove obstacles to cure in patients' practice when their environment is sick or when they're being exposed to these obstacles to cure, like in environmental toxins and radiation and stuff like that. So his areas of interest in healthy building world are cutting edge of environmental medicine, disease prevention, a design of homes, medicinal clinics, and other buildings, as well as remediation and mitigation of problems in existing buildings. So I'll let you read some more of that stuff, but I do want to share a little bit about his education. It began in national, international politics, and Brian worked for an NGO during the 1990s and early 2000s. This work led him into food, nutrition, health, and naturopathic medicine around 2000. He attended Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine in Arizona for the last 3.5 years, and the Indiana University School of Medicine. So, you know, Brian, you have such an extensive thing. I want to invite people to go ahead and read that more about you, and where pertinent, you could drop a little bit of know-how or a little bit of your past to bring up a little bit more information of where you're getting this info. You can share from your heart. I think when you speak, you have a sense of well, you have a sense of authority in what you're sharing. So it doesn't even really matter what you've done and where you've come from, but whatever you want to share with us during this whatever hour or so discussion that we have. Maybe we'll have 10-hour discussion, we'll see.
Can I give a parenthetical just at like the beginning, at the outset, almost like a preface to this?
Yeah, sure. Please do. Please do.
Which is that, again, part of my background is in philosophy as well. Again, there's so many things that we're not going to even cover, but I want to be clear that um, even 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I think this word truth is very elusive, right? These word facts are elusive. Wisdom, knowledge, right? Information. It's kind of an amorphous blob. And so I always just consider, we all have our own experiences. We all have our own education. We all have these different prisms through which we see things. And so what I'm offering is just a perspective of my experience in the world and what I've seen structurally from the top down, as
Yeah.
well as the agency from the bottom up. And, in these various institutions of power politically and medically. So,
Well, thank you for saying that. That's in keeping with NDs for truth. We use the word truth, but we understand that there's not really any arrival point at the truth. The truth is ever evolving, it's ever deepening. I think that there are masters of wisdom that continue to learn. Some of the masters that we like, even in my background, we got Babaji of the Kriya Yoga path, the Siddha of Southern India. We got Yeshua, Christ. And these beings, I imagine them continually learning and growing in the truth, if you know what I'm saying. So I don't think we're ever going to arrive at it, but we're going to hash stuff out. And you and I really appreciate our discussions because I learn a lot from you. And I'm going to definitely pick your brain today. I'd like to pick your brain, and I might disagree with you, and you welcome that. So this is. Yeah. This is.
We don't get it. We don't get anywhere if we all have the same opinions and we just, we basically vomit up what's been pre-digested for us.
Right.
We don't get anywhere. We get somewhere when we make a mistake, or we hear somebody that says something that's completely antithetical to what we believe, and then we're like, oh, that's when the learning begins, when you get into those gray areas.
Yeah, for sure. And some of the discussions that I've appreciated the most between, good thinkers, there's a sense that the heart is connected for an equal intention for goodness and truth and healing and getting to the truth. But the idea there is to bounce ideas off, to like challenge each other a little bit, but not in a way which is the noxious fashion of like where you don't get anywhere. You're just immediately having this cognitive dissonance and fighting each other over differing points of view. So we're definitely not going to do that.
Dr. Moshe, you and I are both Jewish, and we Jews have a tendency to quibble over one little sentence for weeks at a time.
Yeah, right. Or months, like in the days of establishing the halacha and the Talmud, like the oral tradition and stuff like that. So yeah, I agree. Well, that'll make for an interesting conversation, I'm sure.
For sure.
So Brian, let's jump into it. There's some crazy stuff going down politically in the world. There's crazy stuff going down medically in the world with the so-called pandemic, which if you've watched, I think you know where I stand on this, and it'd be interesting. We'll listen to your opinion too. That it's not that people are not dying of the virus, but certainly it's being blown out of proportion. There's political reasons for that. There's monetary reasons for that. There's control reasons. But let's look now at I want to just jump right in there and say, we're going to talk about the election and the results. It really did seem to me, first observing it, that the numbers that were coming in were, some of the obvious areas were in favor of Biden, some were in favor of Trump, but Trump was quite ahead distinctively in certain areas. And then overnight that changed, that flipped. So the idea is that, well, all these Democratic votes came in, but I think that there might be some voter fraud happening. That's what we're seeing. I'd like to hear. Let's get you to jump in on this.
Well, I'm going to give you a couple sound bites first, which is number one, voter fraud exists on both sides in every election. It's, at least in my electoral experience ever since the 90s. Someone's always trying to cheat, especially when it's close. It's just the nature of the beast. It happened during, I think, both Obama administrations and both Bush administrations. And I should state for the record, I'm not a Democrat or Republican. I really don't even call myself independent. I used to be very involved in politics in Washington and Jerusalem. And so when I got to see how the food was made in the kitchen, it's like anybody else, you don't always want to eat there. And so what we were taught was that what is given to the public is theater. And so you don't pay attention if you're a good, like when I was getting involved in lobbying and we were doing these international leadership training seminars and they would teach us that you don't get involved in the politics. You don't pay attention to the politics. That's the noise. That's the theater. You look at the policies. Anyway, so looking at the situation, the first thing I'm thinking of was your presumption, right, is that the numbers were even real. The numbers at this point may not even be real. You can fix a vote electronically, and that's been available for 20 years now. 20 or more years potentially. You can do this through, stuffing the ballots, just like they did, the Democrats used to do in Chicago, under Mayor Daley. Again, both sides do this historically.
Just real quick, what is stuffing the ballots? What does that mean?
It's in cases we could pick on the Bush administration, or we could pick on what's alleged in this election, which is that you have more ballots that aren't legal ballots, ballots where there's sometimes more ballots than actually registered voters.
Yeah, that we've seen that definitely this time for sure.
In the case of the Bush administration, I think in Ohio in 2004, don't quote me on this, because again, my political background is really many, now more than a decade ago, but you had a potential to increase a level of voting. Let's say 300 people voted in one precinct for Bush and 500 voted for John Kerry. You can increase that vote in the electronic voting machines by an order of magnitude or two, and you can decrease the other one by an order of magnitude or two.
Sure.
And this was, again, 15 plus years ago. So I imagine that these electronic software are only more hackable, right? Because every software is hackable. Right. And that's kind of aside from where I'm looking at this, right? So you and I have already spoken about this. I believe that Biden and Trump are run by the same people. I ultimately, again, in the international world, you might call it New World Order. I just look at it from just the state of the politics and the chessboard, right? When I looked at the players around Trump, even before he was elected the first time, which again, I don't even know if that was legitimate, right? That may have been just to get him in power so they can have this very situation that we have right now. But the people that put him in power, the people that are really closely allied with him, right, have really strong ties to banks like Goldman Sachs and ties to known international agitators like George Soros and Zbigniew Brzezinski. And so, you've got a situation where those two people, they ran color revolutions all throughout Eastern and Central Europe. And the Arab Spring. They use organizations like the National Endowment for Democracy, right? And, a lot of people already know these things, but I know some people don't. But my point is that Soros backed people in Iceland and I believe in Greece and Italy who are more of that right-wing nationalist and kind of populist type president. And they usually do that to swing, and I hope I'm going to do this the right way for your viewers, to swing it to the right, okay? And so they want to swing it to the right so that they can swing hard to the left. So I suspected right when Trump was elected that that's what his role was likely going to be. And when I see the Transparency Integrity, I think it's the Transition Integrity Project, writing several months ago about a coup and writing the very scenario that just happens to play out right now, right? And then people on the Trump side alleging exactly how the voter fraud was going to happen days before the election, right? I see what looks like a scripted narrative, a pre-scripted narrative. So, and let's step back, and you said you wanted to talk about controlled opposition. I'd like to first talk about the Hegelian dialectic. And it's so critical to understand how power manipulates us to do things. And again, it could be in any institution of power. It could be religious or scientific or political or financial or even our parents, right? But ultimately the Hegelian dialectic, and we know this from when we used to write our SATs or whatever standardized test we do to get in college. You write, a writing sample and you write the thesis, the sky is blue, and then you write the antithesis. Well, some researchers say, that actually the sky isn't blue. It's a little bit of blue and white. And so we're going to call it a blue and white sky. And then you come in with your synthesis, which is that, well, really, it's not really a color. It's, my point is that you can make it whatever you want, right? So you have this thesis, this antithesis, and then this new synthesis.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the political world, the Hegelian dialectic works a little backwards. They want to achieve a certain goal or a synthesis. And so what they do is they manufacture a problem, and then they agitate that problem on both sides. And they give you evidence so that you can understand it from whatever side you want to pick, right? They give you that evidence or those facts so that you can justify it. It doesn't matter if you're an evangelical Christian or if you're, religious Buddhist, or if you're an atheist. You have all the flavors you need to justify whatever you want. Democratic, if you're a liberal Democrat, or you're a conservative Republican, or you're you're a libertarian or a green or whatever. They have a flavor for everything, right? And so, but the difference is that they already have the solution in mind, right?
Yes.
And so what they do is they manufacture this problem, and they agitate. They agitate both sides. Global warming, now global climate change is one of those issues, right? So I tend to watch these things from a distance maybe it's more the philosopher in me. I tend to watch them, and I don't tend to pick sides, because I suspect most of the time that the sides are being generated on both sides to eventually lead to that synthesis.
Okay, so let me pause you right there. So if that's okay, hold your thought.
Can I tie it together really quickly?
Well, tie it together, then sure.
Here's the thing: the UN has already said that they want to get rid of a lot of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment and free speech and freedom of religion and things like that, and the Second Amendment with gun control, and probably who knows how many other things. So my point is that the goal of all this is, again, as I wrote in a paper on nationalism probably 23 years ago in college, is likely, and again, this is my speculation, it's likely to lead us into a civil war. The way that they did it in the Soviet Union 30 years ago, the way they did it in Germany when it was united in the 40s, the way they did it with the Ottoman Turkish Empire and Yugoslavia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I suspect is happening. And that's what I see happening. And so this fits perfectly into it, because both sides believe that the other side is creating this coup. And so that kind of gets into this. And so I could justify it from either. I have facts to justify either side's viewpoint. But
okay,
in a color revolution, you can't tell what is really true. That's the problem.
Oh, that's interesting. And that's actually the point that I wanted to bring up. You cannot tell what is really true. Okay. So that's a very interesting idea. And I've heard this idea, and I want to state for the record too, I'm not even American. I'm Canadian. So I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. And if anything, I've always identified as being more lefty, more hippie, more, progressive and less conservative. But I find myself identifying more that the truth is actually falling onto the right side more, just simply because of how far left and extreme the left has become, that they're also adopting ideologies that are very Marxist in nature. And, Jordan Peterson is one who's really spoken clearly and brilliantly against the Marxist nature of the far left, identity politic ideologies, which George Soros has fanned the fires of for sure. So I find myself just responding to that, looking for the truth, not for any political party. I'm not attached to being Republican or conservative or whatever, sure. Right? So the question is, you said in a color revolution, you can't tell what is really true, but I can see the truth, at least from my perspective. Again, I'm not declaring that this is the absolute truth. I could see that there are racial problems in America. For sure. I want racial equality. I want peace. But then I can detect what is unhealthy and out of balance in this, aspiring to bring some equality through the movements of stuff like Black Lives Matter and what we're seeing, which have these underpinnings of far left ideologies and Marxists. The founders of of Black Lives Matter admittedly are Marxists. And you see these ideologies when people say things like, it sounds very Orwellian, like violence when it's a response to violence is not violence. Hate as a response to hate is not hate, it's love. So when you see that, I say, well, this is not balanced. This is not true in that respect. You also see, like, for instance, let me just throw a couple of things and you could address this. Trump is rejecting critical race theory. Critical race theory and anti-racism is woven in with these ideologies, which I think have been slowly implanted through social engineering by the likes of Soros. Okay, I see you nodding your head. You agree with that? So he's rejecting that. He's walking out on the climate change hoax. And again, with climate change, we have to take care of our environment. We need to improve the world ecosystems. But climate change as a means of manipulation to get people afraid, and it's more a means to scare us and move us into one of the arms of New World Order.
Agitation into synthesis.
That's right, exactly. So it's agitation into synthesis. So Trump has done many things that I see appears as if he is actually more balanced, right?
Appears, yes.
Right. Now, I understand that,
By the way, I want to make a parenthetical humorous comment.
Sure.
You did just use the word Trump and balanced in the same sentence, which is that's very tricky to do. So good job.
Well, look, if I could be his advisor and he would listen to me, I would have quite a few things to say to him. I don't like his policies on the environment. I don't like how there's a lot of things I don't like about Trump, but a lot of people have believed that he is one of the last, not just him, but he and those who are backing him is one of the last defenses against the New World Order. Because in my opinion, if Biden, they say he's elected, for me, that's just a mainstream media has selected him. There's not really a process which has happened properly. But if Biden gets in, he's a shoo-in for the New World Order. He's going to lock the borders down, more lockdowns. He's going to be doing all kinds of things, which is playing right into moving us towards mandatory vaccinations, all of these ID 2020 chips, but with Trump, that could happen with Trump, but it remains to be seen. So go ahead and jump in. I'd like to hear what you have to say now.
Yeah, there's so many things that I could talk about with what you said. The first is bias. And by the way, let me state my bias. I grew up as, within a Democratic family in Indianapolis, to two parents who taught me that, racism was stupid. And I was also saw myself as a progressive. And in college, I wrote several progressivist, papers. I was really intrigued by William La Follette up in Wisconsin, for example, and a lot of the muckrakers in journalism that inspired me when I used to do my international kind of investigative journalism training, seminars. Again, I was no journalist, but I was an investigator and a researcher. So I wanted to get better at that. But my point is that just understand that previous generation that hold on to the past, it's this horrible new world coming, this new world order, as you've said, or, this past. Remember that those same people gave us the past. They're the ones that created all these problems in the first place. And so they were never honest about the problems, and they didn't really do anything to solve the problems. And we've had some of these same problems that you're concerned about, that you just mentioned, for more than 100 years, some of these problems. And they're the ones, right, at the highest levels, they're the ones that have been blocking any progress in that. And then those same people come along and say, hey, we have the solutions for you. And yet at the same time, for anybody, and I've been following this almost 25 years now, for anyone who's been following these issues for 25 years, when you've heard people say, oh, this is what's coming, on this side or that side for 25 years, and then you actually get to watch that process over 25 years, I can tell you, right, I'm more sympathetic to your viewpoint, right? That's my bias. But I also try to step back and look at it from all the viewpoints. And when I think of what you said about Trump, I think that's a very carefully constructed narrative for him. again, because of the people he associates with, because of the people he was put into a political marriage with, right? Because of the banking institutions that they were a part of, and because they were very very deeply entrenched people within this society, and very connected to Soros, for example. And this is where the people on the right are like, there's no way. There's no way Trump's associated with Soros. He stands for everything that's the opposite, and he might. But that's maybe why they picked him. They still want to, pick somebody so they can. Again, I don't think most of the stuff that's thrown at him is fair.
Brian, you're
Obviously, he's
breaking
been
up.
demonized and he's been neutralized, and he's been monetized in a way that I don't think been almost dehumanized. It says my connection's unstable. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Can you
you've
hear me
been
right now?
breaking up a little bit. I'm getting about 90% of what you're saying. He's been demonized, definitely been ostracized. There's no doubt about that. Now, is that
But
part of the
that's the
drama?
script.
That's
I'm
a script.
believing it's my belief, right? And I'm telling you it's my belief. It's my belief that that's the script. That's the script which lets them swing the pendulum so far hard over to the Marxism, and it gives that justification. That's the only reason why, I think rational people would accept this agenda that somehow we've always had problems with race, right? And climate change and other things. But remember, right, you're in Canada. Greenland was called Greenland because it used to actually feed the Vikings, and it used to be green, and they would grow all their food up in Greenland. Well, most people who know geography, even basic geography, can look at a map. Greenland is usually pretty white because it's covered with ice right now. So we have massive geologic, and meteorologic and climatic, swings over the millennia, right? So the point is that some of these issues have been around, but they want to swing it hard, and so they want to throw everything that's a part of whatever their agenda is in the kitchen soup, which is what they have planned for the reset, for the Great Reset that's coming, right?
Yes.
Well, I've been reading up on the Great Reset for 12, 13 years now, right? And so when I see this, they said the first one was going to be called the Great Flushing, right? And that looks to me like they just flushed our entire economy down worldwide. Then the next step was going to be the Great Leveling. Well, I suspect that the Great Leveling is this leveling of equality in society, but it's hard to force legally any kind of equality. And then you have the Great Reset. So it looks to me like that's how this is playing out right now, right?
Yeah. So then let me ask you this, because I have a dear friend, and I won't mention her name right now, but she's like, I want to call her, she's a lot more than that, but she's like my research assistant. So she sends me a lot of good stuff, and we have these talks, and she really brings me up to speed, and she's really has her finger on the pulse of a lot of these issues. And we're always going back and forth about Trump being he's just one of the players of this scripted story. And versus, you know, he's a wild cannon. He got, I don't know if you know the QAnon whole thing. I don't want to get too much into Q, but basically like those who believe in the QAnon narrative and that whole thing is that, well, Trump was chosen by the military. The true patriots saw what was happening to the world, and the infiltration of these agendas from the technocratic eugenicist, call them globalists, whatever you want to call them. And they wanted to do something about it from a true patriot's point of view. Now that speaks to my heart, because I have idealism there, and I have truth in my heart, and I want to see the world unfolding in a manner which is healthy and balanced and good for all people, because I believe that there is abundance in the universe. So this speaks to me, and definitely there's a hope there that this could be true, that he is a loose cannon. He's not a part of this agenda, right?
Yes, hope is a powerful thing, right?
Yeah.
And everybody had hope in Obama. Obama was going to bring us hope and change, right? And so is Trump. Trump was going to bring this newfound hope. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? I had hope in Obama too, but the racial tensions got worse with Obama, not better. He was not, you know what I'm saying? He wasn't really there. I can imagine for a Black America, for an African American, to see a president elected, the most powerful position, basically, at least outwardly, right, on the surface. I know that there are those who control behind the surface, behind the scenes, but to like the most powerful office in the country, to have a Black person there, that was beautiful. That was healing. That karmic ties were loosened in that. But that's, to me, as far as it went for Obama. He really didn't use his power to really help heal the situation. I think he threw fuel on the fire of racial tension and and stuff like that. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, along comes Trump. He's not really a politician. I think we could kind of agree that Trump is not a politician. Maybe he's being advised by some of these patriots. I'm also right now, I'm playing forward this idea, what I've come to be introduced to. I don't know if I fully identify with or embrace it, but he he's being brought forth by these true patriots who want to bring America back to a land of the free, so to speak. And as soon as he was elected, I noticed that the media turned on him immediately. Now they were making fun of him, sure, during the election in 2016 before, but after he got elected, man, the switch was obvious. It was like they turn on him like a bunch of sharks to feed on prey. And that's because I think he wasn't supposed to win, that Hillary Clinton was supposed to win, that somehow he stole it. You don't think that's even possible? Okay,
No, I
go
think
ahead.
he was supposed to. Again, when I saw who, you got to understand. So let's go back to Obama in 2007. So when the whole Obama thing happened, I was already giving talks on Ron Paul at the time. And everyone was loving Ron Paul throughout the 2007, 2008, election, and again in 2012 with Mitt Romney. And McCain was the runner in 2008, on the GOP side, on the Republican side. But his role was basically to act as a steam valve. Ron Paul, they put that role in there as a steam valve, and my partner is just coming in. So
Sure.
They put the role in as a steam valve. And so a lot of people don't realize this, but Bernie Sanders was a steam valve to help destroy the left. They've been doing this since at least 1912. They did it with Teddy Roosevelt and the Bull Moose Party, so they could weaken Taft and then bring in the internationalists, Woodrow Wilson with Colonel House and all the international money backing him. And that's where you got the creation of the Federal Reserve, the IRS, and things of that nature, these institutions that forever changed the United States. And by the way, so when Obama was coming in, because of my time in Washington during the 90s and a little bit into the 2000s, I already saw who he was associating himself with, and they were the same people that gave us the same problems under Clinton and Bush. And so there was going to be no hope and change. Not real, you're looking at it from the bottom up perspective. You're looking at it from the heart of the little man, right? The little woman, the little person, right? The little peons, right? And so am I in some respect, or I used to. And so I don't do that anymore, because every time they talk, they use language which the little people believe is geared towards them, because they think that these people are thinking on their behalf, and they're not. They're thinking at the high level of person, which is.
Bri, you're totally cutting out right now. All right, I'm gonna.
Which is them as the elite, the same way they did in the
Brian, can you hear me, Brian? One sec. Can you hear me? You're totally cutting out, bro. You're totally cutting out here. Hello?
Are we back?
Okay, yeah, we're back.
So sorry.
Yeah, you're it's very breaking up. 1 second. Is there, okay, let's.
All I'm saying is
I'm sorry.
last I heard on your end.
Brian, it's almost like undoable right now. Your internet connection is so poor that we're not getting any of what you're saying. Can you hear me? Can you read? Okay, we just lost Brian. So I don't know if he's going to be able to come back. Um, Folks, give me a second here. We might go blank for a minute. I'm going to try to see if I can get him back. Otherwise, we're going to have to reschedule this talk when Brian can have a more stable internet connection. I know that okay, it looks like he's coming back now. I know that he's in a hotel room because he's moving out of his house. So and we just kind of threw this together over the last few days to have this talk, which is very, very timely talk. So I hope you can get back here. Brian, do you read me? Sorry about this, folks. Technical difficulties. All right. Hey, man.
We can try this again. I'm so sorry. It's got to be the hotel.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So let's try our best. If we keep cutting out, we'll have to maybe postpone it. We'll make when you have a nice, good, solid connection.
For sure.
So do you have any way to go on like your cellular data? Like that's sometimes is a lot more stable for me too.
Yeah, I could try that. Let me go get my phone.
Sure.
Let me see if I can go find out where that is. Hold on.
All right. Sorry, folks. We get some reality TV right now, and there was a quote that came up. Oh yeah, it makes me think of this this quote that I heard. I could share it with you while Brian is going. Let's see if I can bring it up. One sec. It's really excellent. And Brian, I'm sure, is going to agree with this.
And remember, part of what I like to do in all this too, I like to really play devil's advocate on some things too.
Oh yeah, that's okay. Sure. Now I just want to share this quote, which I think you're going to really appreciate. We can kind of segue into getting back to. I'm just going to do a share screen real quick.
Really quickly, while you do that, can you do me a favor and put in the meeting ID in the chat so I can type it into the phone here?
Oh yeah, for sure. How do I do that? I come over here. Let me stop my share screen. First of all, let me just do. Oh yeah, no, I'll do that first, and then I'll come back and show that quote. I'm sure that people are being very entertained by our bustliness over here. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to put this in the chat as you.
And while you're doing that, I'll comment on the Obama thing. So to tie the Obama thing up, which was that I knew by who was running Obama, that there was going to be no hope and change because it was the military and it was basically all the institutions of power that he, in good populist form, said he was going to take down when he was running for president, but he didn't. Trump did the same thing, and they didn't really take out any of those institutions. And so my point is, once you understand who's running somebody, that's what we were taught in politics, 20 something years ago, was that you pay attention to who's writing the bills, right? The politicians aren't writing these bills. The power isn't in the presidency, right? So we're taught to follow who's actually writing these bills, who's actually funding these politicians, right? And in Trump's case, it's not him. I mean, he's his own source of funding, but he's also, I believe, very, very controlled. But anyway, you follow what ideological influences are there, what financial, economic, political, what their ideologies are, right? And when you do that, you get a good sense of who they are, right? He's still got a bunch of cronies in his cabinet. And so I'm talking about
like Goldman Sachs. You're talking about Goldman Sachs.
Well, I just use that as an example, right? But my point is that several of these guys had ties to Soros. There was a political marriage. I've got probably 40. We could go on for an hour about Trump, but here's my bigger point on this, which is that we all knew or at least I was taught, and we all knew that the president really didn't have the power. So it was always a failed litmus test for us when someone really wanted to discuss presidential politics. That was more the theater for the masses.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of how I think about this. I don't ever really get too caught up in that. So this is theater for me. And to be honest, having read what I've read over the last couple of months and seeing both sides predict almost exactly what was going to happen, it's either fishy or they're the shrewdest people I've ever seen in political analysis to be able to judge human behavior months in advance in states when we don't even know what's going to happen or what scandals are going to happen. And they exactly like that.
They did the same. They're doing the same thing for the new outbreaks, and there's going to be a new coronavirus. It's going to be coronavirus 21.
This is called revelation of the method. They tell you what they're going to do to you.
Yes.
And you get to choose whether you listen to it and prepare for it or not.
Right.
That's the secret in this.
Okay, but then let me ask you this: is it possible? Because I know that you say you say in a humble way that you could be wrong. You've said that, and
I guarantee you I'm wrong on a lot of things.
Sure. But is it possible? Because is it possible that Trump is not a part of the system that you think he is? That he's not a part of this scripted,
absolutely
charade?
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah.
It's absolutely possible. It's absolutely possible. So again, I don't follow Q or QAnon or like this Steinbart guy, but I get to hear all this stuff from other people, and I kind of loosely put it together. So it's like kind of consulting or hearing about a puzzle when you're not there to see the puzzle and the puzzle pieces.
Right.
But so I get to hear the narrative, and I can then listen to people and listen to what their reality is. I get to understand where the chips are falling, right?
Sure.
And so it's entirely possible to me that they picked him because of his idiosyncrasies, because they knew that he would play his role in business and individualism and nationalism and populism and be a loudmouth, outspoken, buffoon who's really intelligent. I'm not trying to say he's not intelligent, but that he would play that role to a T and that they could manipulate him so easily. It's also possible he's highly controlled because of those idiosyncrasies. Maybe he has some peccadillos, right? In his skeletons in the closet. He was very close with Jeffrey Epstein, as were the Clintons, as were just about everybody in power. So who knows who has a black book on him, right?
Yes.
That's the thing. These people have control files. That's how they ascend through the ranks in business, finance, economics, politics, etc. They become more useful if they can be controlled. Now,
right.
I don't think we can know, because what I've experienced in politics over the last 25 years is that somehow the public is really naive, and they believe that there's conspiracy. Like if you and I plotted to, steal your neighbor's car, right? That'd be conspiracy. And everyone says, oh, that makes sense. Moshe's he's a car lover, and Brian has the skills to, hotwire a car, right? Not true at all. But in this hypothetical situation, we go to court and everyone believes it. But yet they believe somehow when the politics and the finance get into, tens of trillions, hundreds of trillions, thousands of trillions, quadrillions of dollars, and the highest levels of power, that all of a sudden people become angels, and that everyone acts with integrity. So everyone on the left and the right believes that their guy is like, will pass any smell test.
Well, I could tell you this, first of all, let me share this quote. You're going to appreciate this. Oh, wait a sec. That's not the quote. It's over here.
And by the way, I have the phone ready to go.
Okay, well, let's leave it for now. We could jump on the phone if we need it. So this is the quote. So secret societies control every aspect of our world, but think they let a president slip past their grips all the way to the top. With the face of Al Pacino from one of his movies. I don't know if it's Scarface.
Scarface, probably.
Scarface, yeah. So that's sort of in keeping with what you're saying. Now, I also want to say that the Q, I've suspected for a while that Q is another psyop.
Great.
To pacify the conservative right, who are the gun-carrying fighting types, to oppose that would oppose tyranny in government. And basically the narrative or the message of Q is like, we got a plan, trust us. You're going to see it, watch and see, and, pray and everything. And instead of, in this time when we're seeing our freedoms slipping away more and more, when people should be standing up to fight, and those who would tend to stand up and fight, the conservative right, they're being pacified into believing that Trump is this hero who's going cleaning the swamp, draining the swamp. And so basically they've gotten the lefties are already in the bag of the New World Order. They don't even realize it.
That's right.
The right conservatives are seeing through this narrative, but they're believing that President Trump is going to save them from what's coming when they should be fighting it. I can see QAnon being that kind of opposite.
I think I haven't even assessed it to that level. I think you've got it. I could smell controlled opposition from Q and QAnon or whatever straight from the bat when I heard it from the people that told me about it. So you've got it. You've nailed it. I don't necessarily say perfectly, but my point is that's a very articulate understanding of these chess moves and people moving behind the scenes.
Okay.
So that would make complete sense to me.
Okay, so then the next question I have, which has been, burning a hole in my pocket, so to speak, for a while, is WTF? What the F do we do? Where is the wiggle room for the godly, for the heart, for the love, for freedom, for truth? Where does that exist? And what do we need to do if both sides are scripted? There's no third alternative there in this system.
Well, and I want to understand. I want to help you understand, I think, a bias of those people. So the goal of these movements is to get you to disempower yourself, to disenfranchise yourself, to have you give your power over to them. And the way that I've noticed that they do this over the decades is that they let you believe that there's a hero who's got your interests, who's got your back. This is what we call, this is what controlled opposition is there for. When Lenin talked about controlled opposition more than 100 years ago, he said the best way to control the opposition is to lead it ourselves. Right. And by the way, I'm not talking about John Lennon. I'm talking about Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, right?
Yes.
Of Soviet, Bolshevik, Marxist, kind of fame.
Yeah.
So they want to control the opposition. Well, if they don't control the opposition is real grassroots. It's really going to spread, but they don't want that. So they have to, anything that looks like it could be to their benefit or to their detriment, they're going to co-opt that movement and use it for their own purposes. And so, but the little person doesn't know that. So then they see hero. And remember, we've been programmed, like we've been socially engineered to think hero since our Disney days, to think in terms of good and evil, to think in terms of sports, by the way, as a social engineering, institution. Remember, all these institutions are social engineering at this point. Your TV shows, your movies. It used to be your news. It used to be your radio, your songs, like almost everything. But sports, especially, right? There's all these rules. Everything is structured. You have the best of the best and the experts, and it all is happening unconsciously. Our entire medical system, by the way, and this is documented in Oxford and Stanford and really excellent publications. Our entire medical system was scripted exactly as it is today, right? Almost 100 years ago by the Rockefellers, and probably with in conjunction with the Carnegies and others, right? I'm not talking secret societies, but just out in the open, right? And these are well documented. Their goal was to create our medical system so that it was a social engineering force for all of society. Right. What that means is that we think of it as doctors, right, and naturopaths and other people as trying to help people and using good science and evidence-based but all that whole system was designed. And I think about it because I come from a bowling family, and even the crappy bowlers, all they have to do is throw the ball right down the lane in a particular way, and the oil is going to take it into the pocket and give them a strike, right? That's what the goal is just to get everybody and lead them right to where they need to go. So when we have a hero syndrome, right, again, which has been socially engineered in us, we think, oh, this person is describing the problem, right? This person has described everything. And then if they're real good controlled opposition, they're going to give you a little bit to do at the end. Write your congressman, tell your senator, right? Call the Supreme Court. Yeah, I can tell you from my time in Washington and almost having worked for the now vice or yeah the now vice president and other people in Indiana, because that's where I was from. That's not really the way politics works. Not at least when I was there. So
Right.
we dispossess ourselves of that freedom because we're giving that power over to someone else, and our energy, right, our love, that heart has just been harvested by sociopaths who've
Right.
created sociopathic institutions and a sociopathic culture. But
Right.
we've done it to ourselves by our choices that we make. And so the problem is that the people who have hearts do not have the sociopathic chess playing skills. They don't even know the players on the table. Once we get up to those secret societies that you mentioned in that quote, our historical methodologies fail to tell us what's really going on. So we don't really know. So people can say, yes, they do this, no, they don't do that, or, the Freemasons control it all, or the Vatican does, or, it's the
Right.
Knights Templar,
Yeah.
whatever thing you want, New World Order, Illuminati, Bilderberger, throw whatever term you want in there. The problem is we don't know because we don't really have good insight into those worlds. And
Right.
insofar that we don't, we have to rely on these heroes. But these heroes are placed there for us so they can capture us. And those are called gatekeepers. Think of the Alex Joneses of the world, the David Ikes of the world, right? These are people that I believe are perfect, prototypical gatekeepers. They come in, they describe the problem, they get you excited that there's someone who shares your values and is going to tell you the truth, and they give you like 70 to 90% great information. The problem is you don't know how they're going to spin you out right then, or how they're programming you unconsciously, or in other ways, or how they're going to spin you out later. And that's the challenge. And some people, they just love that limited hangout that's been created for them. They love it for years because they feel like, oh, I finally broke through and I got the truth. Okay, now I can go back to life. But the insatiable learners, people like you and me, and probably other people watching you, right? Those are the people that even the Hitlers were very afraid of, because they would start to think for themselves and say, hey, wait a second. We were talking about COVID all of a sudden, and now we got onto racial inequality and climate change and all this other stuff, and now having to do, I'm assuming, universal basic income and mass vaccinations. Okay, mass vaccinations make sense because it was COVID. But where did all this other stuff come from, which you might call Marxist or whatever? And I just say is globalist, because the globalists, right, or the oligarchs, they gave us Stalinist, Bolshevism, Leninist Bolshevism, right? They gave us, Western capitalism, which I would say capitalism hasn't been in the West for a long time. We're a very socialist society and have been, even under the Republicans. And if I can make that point for your the audience, when I was in Washington, or when I ask people what they think of when they think of welfare, right? They usually think of poor people. It used to be that they thought of poor Black people or poor like Hispanic people. There was that mindset because that's what they saw on the TV. Now they just think, in general, poor people. But ironically, I'd probably say 99.99% of all welfare is actually corporate welfare. It's taking from the lower classes and the middle classes and distributing it up to the wealthy classes. So my point is that this system is so intricately designed. And so I'll be honest with you, I don't have a solution. I don't know that there is a solution, which is why 25 years after, you're talking to, Brian 25 years ago, and my ideologist, my ideological self, I would tell you I have all these answers. But as I played chess on it for the last 20, 25 years, we don't have a chance as long as people are tuning into Facebook or tuning into YouTube, because,
Right.
you and I had talked once about, re-education camps, for example. And you said, oh, is someone going to be sent to a re-education camp in this new world? And I said, look, I don't think they need to. YouTube is the re-education camp. The algorithm is going to start to slowly steer you towards the gatekeepers who are going to take whatever interest you had in whatever subject, say vaccines, and it's going to spin it into climate change or racial inequality or universal basic income or whatever it is. And
So humanity has a serious wake up call that needs to come. So it has started. People have taken the first steps, and maybe the first steps do include getting that 70 to 90% from the gatekeepers that are handing out rations of so-called truth, but then they have like a woven in their agenda to keep people in a second dream, so a dream within a dream, say, or a second level of control. Now, my interest is I'm sure it's yours as well, is what do we do? What is the real step to do? What can we do? Do we just sit and pray? A lot of spiritual people are saying, don't get involved in what's happening. Just stay in your light, stay in the light, hold the vibration. And maybe I can't say that that's my way of approaching all of this, but I can understand how for that individual they would avoid a lot of issue.
Can I respond? Can I respond to that from?
Well, before you respond, hold your thought, because I want to make a point here. The idea, funny you mentioned that we're both Jewish, like neither of us is a halachic Jew, meaning we're not religious Jews, but we identify, like certainly we come from the cultural and the genetic and a lot of the belief systems. We carry this stuff,
We are both halakhically Jewish, but you're right. We're not practicing orthopraxically. We're not Jewish.
That's right. Not in the Orthodox way. Exactly. So Jews believe that God is behind all things, the so-called light side, the good side of what we perceive, and even what we might call the evil side, or the oligarchs, the cabal, the globalists. And the idea here is that I used this metaphor before. I think it was on the live discussion number 2, is that when you have an illness that manifests in chronic illness in a human being, you could look at that illness and say, oh, this sucks, this is terrible, this is bad. But really, it's a message that something is wrong, right? Like this is what I shared in my course, Holistic Counseling, Mind, Body, Medicine, that the body reflects a problem on a greater level. So you can't look at the disease and say, this sucks, get rid of the disease. You have to understand why it's there. So right now, humanity is we're facing a major crisis. If we don't wake up to these facts, then we're screwed. We're just going to be ushered like a bunch of sheep into the corrals of the choosing of these psychopaths, and the control will tighten more and more so that those outliers will be whatever they're going to do with them. It's going to be harder and harder to orchestrate anything or whatever. So I do think it is vitally important that we recognize that what's happening, it's not good versus evil per se. It's truth versus illusion. It's truth versus untruth. And what we have to do as humanity is we have to recognize what's happening. Then we have to look to the self as the determiner of truth, that the truth resides within the self. Humanity is been totally brainwashed into looking to the authority, whatever that is, in medicine or politics or science, whatever, to tell us the truth, because we don't know the truth. That's been ingrained through social engineering, through our education system. That, to me, is probably the primary issue that's going on in humanity with COVID.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
So
that's the primary thing with politics for the last 50, 100, 2,000 years. It was institutions of religion or other institutions that programmed us. So
yes,
now we're just changing those institutions.
Yes.
Through cultural warfare. So good. Yeah.
Okay. So, it's interesting. Like I learned something recently. I watched a rabbi, what's his name? Gosh, maybe, I don't know if my friend's here, she can remind me of the name of the rabbi, but brilliant guy. He's an Orthodox rabbi. And he basically says that there's some writings of the ancient rabbis and some more modern rabbis that say that when everybody will be poor and have nothing in their pockets, and the global political system, the political system has total control, then this new world order, basically describing it, they call it Romi. Romi. And he says that the Messiah will come 9 months later. Now, I'm not defining who the Messiah is. Is it Christ riding in on a white horse in the clouds, or is it Elijah the prophet? I'm not defining it. Or is it us waking up as this collective? But
sometimes they refer to it as a time as well.
That's right.
Judaic studies is one of my backgrounds as well. But yeah, so it can be a time.
It's a time. It's an era. It's an age of peace. It's what we've all been fantasizing about and waiting for and hoping for. So when that happens, no, looking at this picture and talking about these power structures that are in place, and everybody's asleep and nobody knows what's really happening. Even those of us who are more awake don't even know exactly what's happening. It seems inevitable that this power, this new world order, should and will descend upon humanity. That a terrible darkness will descend upon humanity, and
Yes.
in the darkness, in the despair, in the loss of humanity, the loss of freedom, the soul, the spirit, and godliness in each person will revive the individual. And as a collective, we can then break out or usher in this new age.
It's a wonderful and beautiful theory. And I can tell you, and I don't remember, it was probably about 15 years ago when I started reading, but I think it was in some of the writings of either Paramahansa Yogananda or in Sai Baba. And that's why I read them both at the same time, so I can't remember which one. And I read it right at the same time I read The Jew and the Lotus, by the way, which was one of the most incredible reads that I ever had.
Yeah, I read that too. That's a good one.
But when I was
And Paramahansa, just want to give him a little props right there. You see him?
I saw him. That's why it triggers this in my head to bring up. So
Yeah.
whoever had stated this, they said, look, it was going to be a very, very dark time. And on the other side, and a lot of people weren't going to make it, but on the other side, we'd have 50 years of peace. The challenge, though, and this is
I thought it was 1,000 years of peace, but okay, maybe that's.
I might be. So you're familiar with it, maybe even more than me. This is long ago for me now.
No problem.
Yeah. So, but there was going to be an era of peace on the other side. And so I hear that story and it sounds really nice, and again, I'm not calling into question, what their vision is or their integrity or anything like that. But my point is that even in that world, even in that spiritual guru world, a lot of those gurus were financed by Central Intelligence. Tibet was financed by Central Intelligence. A lot of those Tibetan monks that pray on the Tibetan side, they were slaughtered by the Chinese, right? So my point is that going back to, do we just pray? I don't think we can just pray, but I think it's helpful to pray, right? Whatever your, spiritual inclination is, it can be that. But at the same time, I think it's more important, or maybe it's you pray and then you get your divine guidance, but try not to get that divine guidance from, YouTube or from, whatever these cultural, the culture creation flavor of the day, right? Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, the internet, right? Where all this, I call it news stream media, right? Because everyone always says, oh, it's not we oppose mainstream media and then we want the truth. But 15 years ago, I figured out that the alternative, almost all the alternative stuff was stuff that was spinning off of the mainstream every single day. And in my world, the real reality wasn't ever spinning off of the mainstream. It was a whole different world that existed far away and was completely independent of that sociopathy. So I think that for me, right, and for myself, and this is why, you and I talk, and I'm like, look, I don't really follow this stuff anymore. I get to hear it from other people, but I'm a nerd who's into helping people in their homes, take care of the things that are making them sick in their homes, the things that are destroying their mind because their body is poisoned and a poisoned body doesn't get better. That's where I'm devoting my time, in essence, because giving my time and my power over, I don't think helps people. But I watch when we can radically transform somebody in that way. And so I give more of my energy to things like that I can empirically observe. I don't have to go and look at the weight of the evidence that's been contrived by Johns Hopkins or Oxford or, even Harvard or whatever, right? Again, brilliant things that I've read, but I don't know what that truth is. But when I'm empirically observing as a scientist, right, with medical and public health training and doing that work, that's the greatest stuff for me, because I can make a difference by putting my energy towards something. And I may not be a superhero, but man, if I'm not, doing something for that person that day, right?
It's within your realm. It's within your realm where you have some power. You have real ability there. So I understand what you're saying. That's really good.
Let me throw out a quote, which is that, and this is one of my favorite quotes, but this, two quotes, over the years, but they both kind of came in. This quote will kind of bring it together. But 23 years ago, when I was involved in international politics, and then later, about 10 years later, when I was involved in something else, someone said, hey, focus on your circle your circle of influence rather than your circle of, your sphere of concern. So focus on that sphere of your influence rather than the sphere of concern. So many of us are concerned by all these things, racial inequality, or the New World Order coming and taking over on the left and the right, but we don't really have much control over any of that. And so that's why I have tried to separate myself, to pull myself back from those things and focus on the things where I do have, just like you do, right? In holistic counseling and helping people and teaching this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Me teaching the environmental stuff in homes.
All right. So let me get in there, because this is brilliant. I really appreciate exactly what we're talking about right now. So we focus on your sphere of influence rather than your sphere of concern. So the powers that be, the sociopaths, the eugenicists, the oligarchic technocrats who just have determined for us that they're going to decide our future. What do you do about them? Because, okay, so you're doing real good. I'm trying to do the good that I can. My concern is that when they start to tighten the screws, so you don't have the vaccination, you don't no ticky, no washy, you don't have the vaccination, you're not allowed to go out, you can't fly, you can't cross your borders, and eventually maybe even you're thrown into the camps. I don't know, there've been all kinds of,
you probably won't get your money, you won't get this universal basic income. Or
right.
They give it to you and then they take it back. Hey, you don't play by the rules. I mean, if you don't go get your fingerprint done, at a certain time, they can throw you out of med school, right? Or out of the profession, because there are these technocratic things that have to happen.
Yes.
So, yeah, everything is like that, right? So,
okay, so then, I mean, isn't it kind of humanity's, I don't want to say job, but just knowing that this is happening, like, isn't it our instinct in humanity, when you realize this, to want to shake that off, to want to solve that problem of a handful of sociopaths controlling humanity's direction, because they feel like they're exalted in their existence and they have the right to rule over us little peon humans?
I'm going to read you another quote that I love, and it's not coming up right now. Give me a second.
Sure.
I'm going to read you another quote, and there's actually two of them that I could read here. I'm going to read the first one, and I don't love this guy. I don't know him personally at all, but I always kind of have my own feel about whether someone feels like they really, really get it. Anyway, I love this quote either way. Most people prefer to believe their leaders are just and fair, even in the face of evidence to the contrary. Because once a citizen acknowledges that the government under which they live is lying and corrupt, the citizen has to choose what he or she will do about it. To take action in the face of a corrupt government, and by the way, you could be on the left or the right on this, right?
Sure.
Again, that's why I don't pick sides on this stuff. I'm the anthropologist in me wants to watch this theater, and yet I'm still very alarmed like you. But to take action in the face of a corrupt government entails risks of harm to life and loved ones. To choose to do nothing is to surrender one's self-image and standing for principles. Most people do not have the courage to face that choice. Hence, most propaganda is not designed to fool the critical thinker. It's designed to give moral cowards an excuse not to think at all. And so the problem is that we as humanity have—
Wait a second. Wait, read that last two lines again. One more time. Read that one more time.
Most people do not have the courage to face that choice. Hence, most propaganda is not designed to fool the critical thinker. It's designed to give moral cowards an excuse not to think at all. And let me clarify, I don't like his choice of the term moral cowards. I think it's a little aggressive and it's
judgmental.
Judgmental, right? But from an observational standpoint, he's right. There's a cognitive dissonance there, right? I've got my mortgage. Well, what do I do if I step up against the naturopathic profession for, putting out a horrible, position paper on vaccines, which is wishy-washy and says we're going to do everything the state says and we're going to still stick to our traditional naturopathic roots, and it's just confused, hullabaloo. Well, what do I do? I want to be outspoken, but the profession can ruin me, and then
then where do I make my money?
My family is gone. I'm in debt. 300, 600, $2 million, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
I've got a mortgage, I've got a family, kids in school, I want to provide a good life. And
Right.
so most people refuse to put, as Catherine Austin Fitts used to like to talk about it, they won't push that red button to completely have an integrous society. Each one of us, when I spoke with Jane Goodall about this about 12 years ago, I asked her one of the same questions you asked me, which is, what do we do about this? There's all this big corruption and all this other stuff, and we have all these problems in our world. How do we solve them? And she says, you start with the little things that you do every day in your life. That's how you make your changes, the things that you have influence on every single day. But again, getting back to this, most people don't have that. They don't have that courage to face that cognitive dissonance and that dilemma. So they're almost paralyzed by it. So it's easier for them to just deny it. That's why you'll get people on the right who just, oh, I'm not going to listen to the left, but they're Marxists. They're, anything that they can to start dehumanizing or labeling or categorizing. And on the left, these are racist xenophobes. I don't think any of this stuff is really true. These labels,
Right.
they're
Well, it
meant.
may be true, but the percentage of that is very, very small for the conservative Republicans who are truly racist. There are some,
For sure,
but
I'm sure there are.
there's a small percentage of that. It's very small. It's not the majority. I want to address something that you said, which is very pertinent, Brian. The NDs for truth. The main reason that last week we talked about CONO, which is the College of Naturopaths of Ontario, who are basically obviously bullying naturopathic doctors in Ontario. That's the governing body of Ontario. And the main reason that the naturopaths want to take down their name, not want to stand noticeably with me and have gotten quite scared is because CONO has them by their guts.
Yeah, for sure.
And can squeeze and can throw them out and can publicly shame them. And most people a lot of the naturopaths are afraid to stand up against that.
Yeah. And let me just say that, again, when I was in school, part of the reason I left is because I think that, there were many reasons why I put off naturopathic medical school for 15 years. But one of those things was that I thought that they were heading down the wrong path from what I was hearing from people that I respected. And I came across Jim Senseneg, who I know was one of your mentors and one of my mentors as well. I was honored to be able to be interviewed on this show. Unfortunately, I wish he would have known more about what I did so I could have helped him. But, I had that stuff going back to 2007 when I was introduced to his ideas. And I loved a lot of them, even though there were some things I disagreed with. The bulk of it was great. And yet at the same time, right, I want to pull in the accreditation aspect of this as well. Our whole system is technocratically controlled. And so this is the way that they created the AMA, or, this is the reason they created the AMA and then paired up with the big tobacco. And by the way, the Nazis tried to throw big tobacco out of Germany because they actually wanted to keep their country whole and pure. Right. But the AMA teamed up with big tobacco and
microwaves.
Yeah, and microwaves too. And
Yeah.
they also wanted to team up with the pharmaceutical industry, right? Which was petrochemicals, which was Rockefeller's business. So this was no accident. And the way that they controlled medicine, right? First, through the AMA and the MDs, and then later by the DOs, and now through the chiropractors and through the naturopaths, et cetera. At least I think it's that way for the chiropractors, but definitely for the naturopaths, is they take control of the test. So that the schooling is really just teaching you toward the test, and the test is, I'm being oversimplistic here, but the test and the classes are 90% of the same education that you'd get, and maybe it's 80%, whatever, but it's 80 to 90% of the same education that you'd get in an allopathic school.
Yeah, for sure.
Again,
that's why I really disagree strongly. I wrote about it in my first book I published in 2004, The Revolution of Naturopathic Medicine, that we should get rid of NPLEX, because NPLEX is one of these cookie cutter tests that you're getting prepared to do, and it's all allopathic in nature. It really doesn't support, allopathic is fine. It's good to have that knowledge, but it's strictly predominantly allopathic. And so it creates the impression that, hey, I'm a naturopathic doctor, I passed that exam, but you've demonstrated nothing other than your ability to regurgitate information that you learn, not the subtle dance with nature that occurs with every patient.
And to play the game. Because I know so many people that I went to school with, by the way, and again, I guess I already said where I went to school, but hundreds of people have been made sick by the buildings in those schools over the decades. Some
Yeah.
people were alleged to, claim that they were permanently disabled. And so I watched so many people get sick at these schools, and the school was like, yeah, you know what? The buildings are old, the buildings need to be torn down, but basically we don't care. Get out, you know? And
Really?
so
Yeah.
and so I looked at this, and I looked at my doctor friends who are in the profession here in Arizona and other places around the country, and they're like, look, we're not touching this. Like, I want to, I'll come consult you privately and tell you how to maneuver this, but I won't dare take this on publicly because they'll just stomp me out. And so I'm like, well, at that point, ethically, do we have a profession? Is it ethical? Is it what we really want it to be? And if everybody's just going through these motions just so they can get the title, this is part of the reason why, I was just kind of done with it. It's like, if we're doing that, it's bankrupt.
Yeah,
And
it is. It is. It's bankrupt. And how bankrupt it is we could talk about that. They've gotten rid of all the elders. Not all the elders. There are a few, but they're very few. So the elders,
they're going to create new elders, but they're going to be elders in the Johns Hopkins line, right?
or they might get rid of those too once they've gone. But the elders are the wisdom keepers. They're the ones who have the experience and the wisdom, because really, when you're right out of the gate as a naturopathic doctor, you don't know anything from experience. You have some knowledge that you've learned in school, but you haven't seen the cases, and those are the most important things that help you really learn. So the elders have that experience. They've gotten rid of that. In CCNM, for example, they graduate students who then become the supervisors in clinic, and they have no experience. It is the worst formula for disaster. And this is, I agree, this is a bankrupt profession right now. In the structural sense, there are a lot of great,
a lot of wonderful people,
a lot of wonderful people, a lot of great individuals who, even though they got squeezed through the system, it was painful for them to go through it. And then they got out, then they breathed, and they shook off their tail feathers, and then they went on their way being nonconformist and individually guided by the source within. So that exists for sure.
For sure.
And that is the hope for humanity in all paths, is that for humanity to understand that going within and healing oneself of one's traumas and wounds and karmic patterns is important, and to embody the living essence of who we are, and not to just blindly listen to authority. So that's very important.
And again, those are lessons that, again, I grew up with as a Jew a lot, right? Those are this aspect of making the world a better place. And these are just things that, again, I think you and I share that because we were, raised in this culture, right?
Yes.
Religious culture and ethnic culture as well. But yeah, and I want to be clear. It's not that I don't support all the people that are doing naturopathic medicine out there. I very much support them. And I really, when I used to read Spittler, right, and I used to read the old books in naturopathy, I realized that they really, even back in the 30s and 40s, they couldn't even really define naturopathy well. It was this kind of umbrella hodgepodge of ideas and modalities. And that's what really kind of gave it strength, is that there were so many things that were really doing amazing things, in treatment. And yet they were trying to bring them all together and call them one thing. Well, that's already kind of a political movement in and of itself to do that. And because of that, we at least have a profession, right?
Yeah.
But the way it's gone, since then, right, in the last 70 years, that's where it gets really challenging. And so you've got the situation now where people, again, are so beholden to the profession or the boards that are going to determine this. And then, like you said, most of these people, like in my school, again, you're given points for having an MD who has, teaches anatomy to come teach to you. So
Right.
I don't know any other schooling system, like an allopathic school would almost never choose a naturopath, to teach most of its classes. So
no, right, for
there's all
sure.
these challenges within the system, but ultimately what it leads to is a problem, because people are losing touch with really I don't want to just say their philosophy, but they're losing touch with that philosophy, and they have an opportunity to take that philosophy and really use modern scientific tools, I think, to help validate what's great about it, and really say, hey, we thought this was good, but it's really not.
Right.
And
And
there's
if
still
you
that
see,
opportunity.
yeah, yeah, I really like where you're going with that. I absolutely agree. I'm glad we're talking about this right now because I want these things to be said about the profession in a public fashion. I want it to be for those students who are going through, and even for naturopathic doctors who have been, I'm going to use the word wounded. It's not the best term, but they've been wounded going through the education system, the colleges, because in their hearts they hear naturopathic medicine, they hear nature medicine, they hear nature cure. They think this is what I'm going to get, and then they go in and they're hit with this terrible reality that the schools are so misaligned with that actual principle that it's just they're just being paid. It's just paying it lip service, like it's even an affront to put the principles of naturopathic medicine on the walls of the colleges and then to basically be pissing all over it, excuse my crudeness. But, and even the leadership, like the AANP, like that is a real compromise organization. The American Association of Naturopathic Physicians. They're also embracing a lot of these far left ideologies, hook, line, and sinker, shaming students and doctors who are speaking out against them. What happened with Andre saying, like he used the N word in Chicago. He did it out of ignorance, not out of race, not out of hateful or real derogatory terms. And then I stood up to protect him. Not that what he said was right. I want to reiterate that he didn't say what was right, but the shit show that resulted after, you could just see all the social engineering and all the emotional reactivity in the profession coming to light. And it wasn't dealing. It's like, look, that word was wrong. It wasn't dealt with in a fashion which was in harmony with like a healing that could come from it and a learning. It was cancel the man, remove his name from reality. He doesn't belong in the profession anymore. This is this cancel culture that is infiltrated into naturopathic medicine too. And the AANP is going after the HANP, the Homeopathic Association of Naturopathic Physicians, to remove all signs of Andre Sain, or else it's a racist organization because he used the N word because he was translating from the Quebec French, which is ignorance. And yeah, he needs to learn from that for sure.
Sure.
But this is just another example of how un what's the word I'm looking for here?
Empathetic.
Well, definitely.
Let me put a couple more words. Uncompassionate,
Yes.
unempathetic, unsympathetic, and I would argue, or I might posit the hypothesis that you're dealing with a profession, you're dealing with an institution, and by its definition, institutions and professions don't have souls. And so when they start to aggregate, right, they tend to have, this is why we have, the psychology of organizational behavior. They act in different ways in groups and
Yeah.
professions than they do as individuals. And so they tend to act without souls and without empathy.
When
And
you
so
saw
I think
this actually from
I want to say this because I really want to thank you so much for holding this space for me over the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years since I've known you, and for everybody else, so that we can air our frustrations, but we can also have the language of communication, and or the communication of love and compassion and empathy, and try to hold that space. But you hold that space so well for all of us, and so I want to thank you from my heart for doing that, because it's so necessary, for all these people who have disparate points of view. Again, even me, I don't know
yeah,
what's true necessarily. So
right.
it's so
Well,
critical. So, but I think the profession doesn't have a soul. And so when you don't have a soul, you're going to act in more of a sociopathic manner.
right.
Right.
And the interesting thing is the far left ideologies, they're based in really good things. The people that I might refer to as social justice warriors, and you know, some that identify as woke, the woke movement, although that term has been appropriated by all kinds of different sides. But the social justice warriors, they have good hearts. They want to end racism and everything, but they don't realize that they have become the tyrants, that they have reversed racism, that they have
Sure,
reversed hatred.
for
And
sure.
it's all justifiable in their mind by the same Orwellian idea that, you know, war is peace, ignorance is strength. Like, well, hate is not hate if it's responding to hatred, or racism is not racism if it's responding to those who have been racist, like white people or whatever. So this is a huge problem. And I hate to see these parts of the profession, like this colleges and the presidents, they're all jumping on the bandwagon of kowtowing to these Soros sponsored social engineering agendas that we see. So they're really not havens for health. They're not havens for health. They are taken over by the what you were calling like the technocratic agenda to
I'm not sure they weren't there from the beginning though. That's my point.
oh
And let me take you back to a conversation I had in 2007 with a brilliant historian. His background was in the basically the second half of the British Empire. Um, and so we were talking about grassroots, and really two amazing things that I take from his class. One is, by the way, that science has been political, extremely political, since it was institutionalized by the Royal Society back in the I believe 1640s, if I remember correctly. It might be.
with Sir Isaac Newton during that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's number one. But number two was we had a discussion. This is probably back 13 years ago, 14 years ago. And I said to him, I said, look, I'm really curious to know from your standpoint, knowing how good the British were at intelligence, at co-opting things, like they had one of the best intelligence agencies in the world, you know, with Russia being right there with them. And I said, tell me something, all the grassroots organizations that are out there, right? How many of them are really grassroots at the beginning? And then how many of them are actually allowed to stay grassroots, you know, 5, 10 years later when they become big? I said, I would imagine it's 10, 20% tops that are able to stay true. And he told me, look, it's probably not even 3 to 5% that start out true. But
Jeez.
basically, they're going to get co-opted, and he said probably it's closer to zero of the ones that can stay that way. They're going to get co-opted if they have any power for what these people want to achieve. And so that's why if you ask what we can do, we can stop giving our power over to these other institutions to pre-digest. I always say, and this is, you might like this, you want to type this down, but one of the things I always tell my clients and patients and other people that we're working with is that, you know, I don't just want to know where my food is grown, right? I want to know where my medicines are grown. I want to know where my building materials are grown. And most importantly, I want to know where my information is grown,
Mm-hmm.
right? I need to know what the ideological biases are of anybody. It could be you, right?
Yeah.
You have your own bias in some of the stuff that I don't agree with. And
Sure.
it's not that you're wrong. I don't know. I just
Yeah.
see these in philosophy, we build our arguments on presuppositions and then we start making conclusions. But if our presuppositions are wrong, our conclusions still could be right, but for the wrong reasons, or they could just be flat out wrong. And so
Right.
I'm always looking at those presuppositions and I have a different viewpoint. And so I see and presuppose different things. But so anyway, so coming back to, to kind of bring this, all back to someone like Sane or what have you, right? We have these institutions and these institutions they're technocratically controlled. And so these organizations that people want to give their energy to.
How? You finish your sentence, but then I want you to answer the
great.
how.
So again, look at everything you have to do just to become a doctor, a naturopathic doctor. Look at everything you have to do to go become, pick your favorite specialty, right? You have to meet all these criteria. Well, that by definition is technocracy, right? You're using technical definitions to define what that person is or what they're able to do. They may still all have those letters and completely disagree with each other, right? But professions don't usually like that. They like it to be uniform. That's where the MDs are really brilliant. right, is that they actually have political and social cohesion because they legislate it. And the NDs are following suit. And that's where really the spirit and the soul of I think naturopathic medicine is really struggling right now. Right. And as you said, you've been onto this since 2004. I really got more into it when I went into the school and saw how bad it was.
Yeah. Well,
But
I was onto it in 1996 when I first started. I quit the program 3 times because it was so disappointing, but I wanted to finish to get the piece of paper so that I could maybe have some influence to maybe make some change, or at least bring some light and some of the real principles of naturopathy that weren't really being shared, or they actually there were a little bit during my time, and like through homeopathy and through acupuncture, but these things are getting phased out of the program as
yeah,
well.
for sure.
Anything that has vitalism, anything that has essence of the philosophy. um yeah, so yeah.
My point is the technocratic right aspect is you create technical means by which you judge someone, whether it's for a test, right, NPLEX, or for the profession, or by standards, right, the standards that you accept, your standards of care. When I
Yeah.
was in my first semester, one of these people that had just graduated a year or two before was teaching us in our clinical practice class, and they were teaching us these standards of care, and I'm like, these are horrible. Like, what is this? Like, these aren't naturopathic at all. She's like, oh no, they're not per se naturopathic, but they're what we do because that's what responsible medicine is. I was like, well, kind of. And again, I'm still a philosopher, so I'm always asking myself these questions, but I'm also usually bold enough to ask on behalf of the other students who are learning, well, why did we choose these? Or I didn't even know we did choose these. And I could tell she didn't like me after that at all.
Right.
And again, I'm just asking questions because that's how education is for me.
You should be allowed to ask that question because it's a darn good question too.
Yeah,
Now, let me get a
yeah.
little deeper here. I want to ask you to go a little deeper. Um, for me, that's too soft a boundary of how the technocrats are controlling the profession. To me, I'm wondering if there's more puppet strings of those who are in the positions who are making the decisions.
Well, and let me say this. I'm sure there is. Again, let me speculate for a minute, and then I'll come back to some other real world examples of this technocracy.
Sure.
Um, and let me even start with the real world things. Think about the documents that you have to produce to become accredited, right? So that you can teach. All the BS documents, policies for this, policies for that, that nobody follows, right? And then they use such vague language, created by the lawyers so they can basically choose to ignore whatever they want or apply it haphazardly in this case or that case. I know there was tons of allegation of racism over the decades at SCNM, and I got to see what I thought was racism while I was there as well. But they would apply these things, and I'm sure this goes on at other institutions. I don't want to just pick on the naturopathic institutions. This is about technocracy, but my point is they're required to come up with all these policies and all these documents and all this other stuff that controls almost every way that they have to act and behave. So I might even argue on some level, and I don't know if this is true because I haven't been at that highest level myself, but that maybe some of them, these policies, these guidelines, these protocols are so socially engineered, so technocratically engineered that they can't act like human beings, because the moment that they do, they're going to get sued because they favored this person versus that person. Again, I don't want to make them demons here at all, right? I see this as a failure of a system and the failure of the individuals to try to do the right thing in that system. But when the system limits you, you almost become, if you want to keep your, get your daily bread, right? Pay for your mortgage, you got to keep doing that. So at the higher levels, right, I would imagine. So I'll tell you what I see, and this is just my speculation as I see naturopathic medicine, and I'm tying this in to how they're going to possibly control and bring them in, say, to these, what you would call these social justice warrior type scenarios. But seeing how it's done in other ways, power is usually done in most the same ways in different institutions. They all learn from each other and they all mimic what each other does. And the bankers and the lawyers and things like that, the boards all intermingle. So, but that being said, let me go into this example first. So if Now I'm going to say first where I see it going. So I see it going as it's going to be naturopathic in name, most likely, but I believe it's actually going to become the new medicine of the world. So think about what old medicine was 200 years ago. It was a lot on chemicals, you know,
Yeah.
going back even
Bloodletting and like
400.
drilling holes in people's head to let out the demons if they had headaches, like that
You
kind of
got it.
medicine.
And then we went into germ theory, and then we started going into genetics, and now we're in this almost post genetic kind of world now. And I see what I see again with my broad background in medical I should say
Education.
philosophy. Well, basically the philosophy of science and medicine, right? The
Yeah.
history and philosophy of science and medicine, because that's definitely one of the areas where I study. What I see as a possible future that looks clear to me, but doesn't have to be this way. I see it as the next phase that they're going to go into is more of a gentle, humane, natural medicine. And it's probably been created through integrative and functional medicine to be that new vessel that will hold the integration of the old allopathic ways and the ways that didn't work with the naturopathic ways and the things that really do work, and then blending them together ideologically to give us this new synthesis to march us forward in this kind, compassionate, beautiful medical system. All those old MDs are going to get re-educated and they're going to become naturopathic overnight. But
Mm-hmm.
you and I know the philosophy of naturopathic medicine is not going to be there. The substance isn't going to be there. The roots and the interconnectedness and the mycorrhizae that are in the soil digesting those little
Yeah.
nuggets for the naturopathic plants and doctors to take
And
up.
homeopathy will not be there either, and vitalism won't be there.
Well, vitalism may still be there because it looks like they want to keep, Chinese medicine into the acupuncture.
Well, they'll pay it
kind
lip
of world.
service. They'll pay it lip
That's
service,
right.
but it won't be the real vitalism that we
That's right, because
understand.
they can't give you real vitalism because they don't embody it. They don't have it. They don't live it. They
Yeah.
don't know it. They don't know what it smells like or tastes like. It's like a prisoner, who is going to tell you about freedom. All they have is some ideas about freedom as a prisoner.
Yeah.
So that's the way I see it. But I see this new fusion as being the new genetics, the new germ theory, right? The new chemical solution to medicine. That's where I see it going. And naturopathy is going to play its role because it's going to become one of the precursors to this new medicine.
Right. It's like it'll be a takeover, like the osteopathic profession. The osteopathic profession, right?
No, I would say not quite like the osteopathic profession. Osteopathic, I believe, was kind of the dirty stepchild that no one wanted to really acknowledge, but will let you become doctors if you sell your soul. I'm not suggesting that with naturopathy. I'm suggesting and maybe osteopathic fits in this as well. I'm suggesting a fusion of the little bits that they want to keep out of all of this into this new medicine, which is egalitarian. It's equal. We're bringing in all this, the best of whatever works, and then they still control the science. They still control the weight of the evidence, and they still control the professions, meaning they're still going to control the education, and that means they're going to control the thoughts and the things that they think about, the things that they teach about, the things that they test about.
Okay, so let me ask you
this. I
see.
Well, hold on. That's what I see as far as where I see it likely going, and I think naturopathic will have a seat at that table if she does what they want them to do. In the moment that she doesn't, and I say she as a profession, the naturopathic profession doesn't accept vaccines, or doesn't accept standards of care, or doesn't accept, the insurance rates, or doesn't accept, this technocracy or whatever, or doesn't jump on the virtue signaling bandwagon, right? She's not going to be welcome at the table. So all they have to do is get the leaders who are corrupt or want to be a part of the system so badly, and we know how badly naturopaths have that Stockholm syndrome, where they really want to be acknowledged by their captors as having validity, or at least that's how I see it, right? So now they want to prove to the abusive stepfather, no, we're worthy, and we can do it like you did. Well, this is how the Nazi collaborators, the Jewish Nazi collaborators, used to function, right? So that's kind of how I see it. And so they're going to.
It's good. I want to say that's brilliant. What you just said is brilliant. I have one question.
And I could be completely wrong, but that's what I see as
It makes a lot of sense. It resonates a lot. I've addressed some of these things in my own way in my 2004 book, The Revolution of Naturopathic Medicine, that we basically have a very weak sense of identity, and we're trying to earn credibility by emulating conventional medicine because that is the accepted, authoritarian kind of medicine and system in place. But I want to know, so what you just said kind of answers the question, but I want to just push this a teeny bit further, and then I'll lay off of this. Are there people who are offering money to those presidents of the colleges? Are there people pulling strings, threatening or offering incentives so to grease the palms and ensure that naturopathy sells itself out? And the reason why I ask this is because if you look at some of the colleges, not all of them, I think some of them are kind of clinging on to naturopathic principles. Like NUHS is looking good in some ways, and so is Boucher. It looks like they're somehow fighting off the wolves of technocracy to a certain degree. So CCNM recently, Bob Bernhardt, the president, has said that CCNM is going to join in on the effort to reduce vaccine hesitancy of the COVID-19 vaccine and train naturopathic doctors to be vaccinating their hesitant patients. Like, good God, what a departure from anything sensible and naturopathic. So I see a corruption there that goes beyond just one person's idea, that there seems to be an influence there, a technocratic influence that has infiltrated into the profession. How? I want to ask you that again. How? Is it just that people see that if they stand up for truth that they're going to be fired? But if they're the president, who fires them? What would stop somebody from having good ideologies and being aligned with true principles? What stops people from being good people and good naturopaths and steering the direction in the right direction? What's really governing and pushing the profession down the drain?
Well, and let me say, I'm not qualified to answer some of these questions. And they're really great questions. And I imagine some of your other guests are going to be much better at this. But let me say this. You asked, are they getting greased? Are they getting incentives? I would say that I don't have any direct knowledge that any of them are. But unless they're outside of historical bounds of politics, finance, and social and professional structures, I would say yes. But you got to understand, it may not be as insidious as you think it is. It may be like, look, if you don't do this, you're not getting student loans. And if you're not getting student loans, you're not going to be able to pay, the retirements, right? And your pensions for the people that have retired from your school or your own, right? As a president. And so you have these compromises that you may not even, again, I want to come from a compassionate side from their standpoint as well. I don't know that it's all like, sociopathic, right? I just want to introduce these ideas that these are the kinds of dilemmas that happen in these kinds of organizations, right? And again, I studied some social psychology, when I got my psychology minor at Indiana University in Indianapolis. But anyway, so where I'm going with that is that part of it may be people just following the trends, right? It's easy to become a social justice warrior in our society. I was one 20 years ago or 30 years ago, I should say, until I started realizing myself, wait, when I started hearing these discussions about, affirmative action, and I would hear them defined differently. And I was like, wait a second, they're both using this term, but the Republicans are defining it one way and the Democrats are defining it a different way. And yet the media is spinning it to the public as though, it's just this thing that's coming, and that's that agitation. So it doesn't matter what the reality really is, right? Or what the definition is. They're just going to keep marching along with whatever term. And I started seeing that hatred and that racism of the people that I thought were Democrats. And so I kind of shifted more to the left. I was more of a progressive, empathic person who wanted to see this social justice, but I kept seeing all this racism even there. And I was like, or not racism, but this kind of reverse racism, right? Which is institutionalized racism, which anyway, but so my point is that there could be ideology involved here. You have to think about the finances of the profession, right? Part of the reason that they didn't want to fix any of the stuff at our school, and most of these schools, I want to finish the profession. I want to become a naturopath. I had for 20 years, but I wasn't, my doctors were very clear that if they're not going to make changes and they're not going to, accommodate you, that you could lose your life in this and that people die in this. And you know that I believe that Jim Sensenig died because of exposure in his house to mold after the tree and the hurricane and all the water damage. I know I was the first one to probably figure that out. And again, I don't know that we can know without an autopsy or anything like that. But my point is that I treat those kind of patients, and we deal with those kind of patients and clients all the time. That's when it starts. And so the schools they don't have the money to fix these old buildings that they're in for the most part, or they're not willing to spend it in that. And again, I don't want to make their decisions for them, but my point is they're killing people in the name of naturopathic medicine, or they're at least harming people. They're disabling people. And when I wanted to go to these other schools, everyone's like, no, don't come here. Professors and students alike, we have the same mold problems here in these buildings and formaldehyde problems and all kinds of other problems. Just, stay away. So I also want to say, so ideology, I also want you to understand that when I used to study, when I was taught how to figure out how an organization acts, you have to go to their board and you have to look at all the people on that board, and you have to know what other boards they belong to, because that's how the influence comes in. So they're going to pick people in the banking realm, in the advertising realm, in the legal realm, and these people are going to be on boards of other schools that aren't competitors, and they're going to help them do things the same way everybody else would do. My point is that a president doesn't always make their own decisions. The board does, and a lot of times the board does it for money. They get paid, and oftentimes very well. I don't know how they are in the naturopathic profession, but in other realms they do. And so you're looking at all these different factors, and you get this really interesting organizational psychology. I can't imagine, again, I almost think it would be better if you had someone who was more, really concerned about the future of naturopathic medicine and had experience on those boards at the highest levels of naturopathic medicine.
Well, you've done great.
They're probably going to be able to tell you better than me, right?
I pushed this question into a realm of, which is, I was just looking to see what your hunch was or what you might think. I don't expect you to know for sure. I'm asking the question because I want others.
What do you think of what I said? Yeah. What do you think of what I said too?
Yeah. What do I think about what you said?
Yeah.
Well, my feeling, okay. So I've taught all over the profession, like at all the different colleges, basically, and I've spoken to students there. And there's a picture, that you get, and I think that in naturopathy, 30. I'm gonna this is my absolute just throwing numbers out here, but it's based on hunches. It's just instinct. I have nothing to back it with. 30% of students go in wanting the real naturopathic deal. 30% of students go in, they want their medical doctor wannabes, but they didn't get accepted. So they hear about naturopathic medicine, like, oh, maybe, I'll do that. 40% go in, they're interested in natural medicine. They have no idea what that means, but they will choose it as a career. Something guides them. So that means that
it sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds good. It's natural medicine. I could be a doctor. I can make money doing natural stuff. I like the idea, but they have no idea. They don't have the instinct that the 30% does of what that might feel like or look like. So that means that what the colleges present and offer, 70%, that's the majority, will therefore go with whatever is offered, because the 30% of allopathic minded are going to like the allopathic stuff. And the 40% that don't know either way are going to be swayed. And so the profession is going to be really drawn off course.
Yeah.
So my hunch is that that there have been these subtle influences, that the root of the problem is the lack of strength in the individuals who are in the office positions in administration. They're either not naturopathic doctors, or they're naturopathic doctors who don't really understand the principles, and they're afraid to embody that for how it looks. Instead of it takes a strong person and a person who's willing to get a few bruises and bumps, a person who's willing to dig into the dirt and sweat and maybe break a few fingernails along the way to stand up for the principles of the profession. Like if the leaders could do that and be willing to, you know, tighten the belt a little bit. You know, we may not get the funding. This thing, you know, we might have to be in the basement of some thing with like a light bulb hanging down and not have a fancy exterior. But if we held the essence of the profession, that would grow in time and people would really come to respect naturopathic doctors for being well founded in who they are, because that's what people really respect. When you look at somebody and you hear them talk, when they are being true to themselves, it shows. And that's what people really are drawn to, that it's a real confidence, not a false confidence of emulation, of regurgitation and being confident in that. Like what really appeals to people is people who are true to themselves. And so if the profession could be true to itself and not worry about what the public thinks, not be afraid, and trust that by doing what we're doing, we're going to really help people. And that's going to show people the validity of the medicine as it stands on its own. Then I think we could do something. But I don't think we've had that kind of leadership. And all the things that you mentioned, I feel are very good ideas as to why. And not being malicious. I think maybe I'm being a little hard on it because I'm disappointed, you know, in the profession for having sold out. So it feels to me so easily and so readily. But your propositions, just simply like the technocracy and then, you know, getting the funding and like being recognized and accredited, those are the
and hospitals, insurance,
yeah,
right? Medicare, Medicaid,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Student
Valid.
loans, student loans.
Student loans, yeah.
I'll tell you something though. What I've learned, like with Kono, I'm still leery of getting accredited for the wrong reasons.
Yeah,
If you don't well define
licensure is an issue.
licensure is an issue. If you try to get licensed by what the government can recognize for your medicine, and you have to sell out your principles, then right away you're toast right there. Right. That's what happened with Kono.
For years, people have been cheering naturopathic licensure, and you know, I hate to admit this because there's part of me that's like, you know, there really is part of me that's like, yes, that's really nice, and there's the political part of me that's like, no, that's how they're going to destroy you.
Yeah,
their weapon against you. You may sound good now, but you don't realize the price that you're probably going to pay as a profession. The same thing for, you know, drug licenses, you know, being able to be DEA licensed here in the United States. I suspect that these things are going to be given grudgingly, but they're going to be used, you know, with a double-edged sword later on as weapons against the profession.
100%. That's what has happened with Kono in Ontario. That 5 years ago, Kono stepped in as the new governing body for naturopaths in Ontario because of the accreditation licensing. And ever since then, it's been a rapid decline in what I would consider the naturopathic principles, and you know, gunning after naturopaths who step out of line with these hard boundaries that are now being set. And for instance, Kono and ANP and all these leaderships are saying naturopaths don't say anything about COVID. You know, it's beyond your scope of practice. You know, you can't suggest anything that might be helpful in prevention or in the treatment of COVID. And I think that's one of the biggest shams and one of the biggest shame on yous for our profession, in not being more vocal to help people that are, you know, either susceptible or contracting, or, you know, and also just standing up against the narrative. I've spoken to students at some of the colleges, and they say that the mainstream narrative about the pandemic is so strong that nobody is challenging it. They're afraid to even say anything against it.
Well, let me interject here because I don't want to. I'm assuming there's a time limit for us to speak tonight. We may even be
yeah. We'll wrap it up in a few minutes. I think
I want to bookmark something for future. I know you wanted to talk with me about my experiences at the IU School of Medicine on AH1N1 in 2009, as well as my experience when I worked with the federal government as environmental health and safety director for, and it was incident commander for Ebola preparedness and things of that nature. But in preparation for this, I wanted to just go and really help. And again, I think most people probably know this, but you'd be surprised. Again, I'm an epidemiologist, so I'm always thinking with these different hats I have on. So when I ask, what are the clinical criteria for all these cases, right, that are skyrocketing, right? I come look at the clinical criteria right on the CDC site, and you have to have two of the following symptoms. Now, I'm going to give you the most easy ones first.
Yeah.
But myalgia and headache.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't describe 30-40% of the population right there. I don't know what does, but that's, you only need those two, and then no alternative, more likely diagnosis. But if you have a fever, measured or subjective, if you just feel like you might have a fever, that
right.
Chills, rigors, myalgia, headache, sore throat, new olfactory or taste disorders, which, by the way, can happen from mold or mycotoxins and can happen from other chemicals.
Or other infections, like
other infections entirely. But remember, other infections are often driven by various environmental factors, right?
Sure.
In fact, we had a situation where in my medical school, in the first semester of school, I think it was right after our first quarter of school or second quarter of school, they replaced all the carpets in this really just nasty building that even even like the highest people in the school said it just needs to be torn down. And they decided to renovate it instead, by the way, and not renovate it probably properly, but they put in new carpet. Well, in our class, within 3 weeks of starting that next quarter, about 60% of the maybe even closer to 70% of the students got sick. Right, they all came down with something, right?
Right.
They all spread something. But remember, I have the epidemiology hat on, but I also have the environmental health science hat on. So I know how those chemicals reduce your immune response, right? Lower your immunity and make you more susceptible to opportunistic infections, which might be right there in the carpet, right? Might be there in the walls or in the airstream in the HVAC system or whatever.
Or if you're familiar with the exosome theory, that could be just them dumping out the toxicity and mimicking flu or something.
That's right. And in fact, I came across a lot of the exosome stuff in 2009 when I was critically researching the 2009 H1N1. And knowing that all these antiviral stuff that we give to people, it doesn't just destroy viruses, it destroys intercellular communication in your body. So your immune system is completely thrashed. And then they tell you have, T cell count below 200. What is that? That's AIDS, right? So you have that dynamic too. But anyway, so you got two of those symptoms, or at least one of the following. You could have cough. And by the way, when I wear my mask and I wear it for too long, I start to develop a cough.
Yeah.
I take it off, the cough goes away.
Yeah.
So the masks actually cause COVID by definition.
Right.
To be clear.
It's crazy.
Shortness of breath. The mask gives me shortness of breath and many other people I know, including a lot of our clients and patients. Difficulty breathing. It gives me difficulty breathing. The masks are causing a massive outbreak of COVID. And I'm being a little disingenuous here because this is, I never even went and looked at the case definition till today.
Right.
I know how preposterous these things are, and I didn't want to get angry. I didn't want to, whatever. But
so, Brian, let me interrupt you for a sec. You're probably going to want to finish your thought, but why don't we just leave this as an introduction for the next time we speak? Because I initially said, oh yeah, our talks on Endies for Truth, they're going to be about an hour and a half. And I know that we could talk a lot about this. So let's not go too deep in it. Let's wrap this up now.
I just wanted to give you an example of that to show you that even so much as just trying to do something simple, like COVID or anything else, and create a case definition, how absurd it is to the bigger thing, to the bigger picture of everything. And this is symptomatic, not just with allopathic medicine, and I would call allopathic public health. Right. And we'll talk the next time about where public health came from and how it originated in our country, which is fascinating. But yeah, my point is it's so easy. Everybody's got COVID, or almost everybody. Right. And but that's how lousy the definition is. And so when we talk about the bigger aspects of this, we're going to have to go much deeper into testing. And I have probably 40 topics that we could talk about just COVID.
Yeah.
And then
Let's do that next time, because I have lots of talks. I want to talk about the PCR tests, like what those are doing, and definitely the messing with statistics. Also, what you just brought up is a great subject.
and I'll give you the history of my segue into this, because the way I learned about this stuff, and I did it really quickly. I did a 2-hour, 2.5-hour presentation for actually a couple presentations to different groups of doctors, probably early to mid-April.
Mm-hmm.
You asked before when I figured this out. I didn't figure it out. I don't think you ever can figure it out in the moment, right? I saw 3 or 4 possible avenues by which it goes. And again, this is a bookmark for later, but 3 or 4 possible avenues for what really might be going on. And then we let the data and the real stuff tell us, right? Real things tell us how solid something is. And
Yeah.
then you know how to do that, you'll see it's either really serious or it's really nothing.
Right.
Or it's something in the middle. So
all right, great
we'll bookmark that.
great segue for next time. Let's bookmark it. I want to thank you, Deep. I think what we actually discussed and what you shared tonight was brilliant, relevant, important from the very start of the whole, drama, both sides, controlled opposition. We've really touched on a lot of great stuff, and that's what I was hoping that we would get to. So next time, I'll be looking forward to it as well, again. So thanks a lot, Brian.
Yeah, and let me also say that a lot of other people probably have experience and knowledge in some of these areas where I just have framework, and so they can fill in those holes, and they'll get, it'll remind them of something that they know.
Let them come forward. Let them come forward.
Please, if they do, again, we'll all be better for it. So that's what's really incredible about all this, is that none of us we live in an information age, and there's no way one of us can master all the information, all the perspectives, and be so cross-disciplinary and interdisciplinary.
For sure.
So
for sure. All right, Brian. So this has been episode number 4, Endies for Truth. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we managed to get through that technical glitch.
Yeah. I'm sorry. And have hopefully a more stable environment.
Yeah,
we're redoing our floors and painting our house. So
all right, well, good. Let's hope that we can set that up for next time. So God bless. Take care, and see everybody. We'll see you next time. Yeah. This is Endies for Truth. I'm Dr. Moshe.